All right, good morning and welcome everyone. My name is Tony Nguyen, and I am the program analyst for the CalFresh outreach team. I'll be the moderator of today's webinar. Our topic for today is Scope of Work Explained. I'm going to go over a few logistics before we get started. Today's webinar will be approximately 1 hour. This webinar will be held in listen-only mode. You may connect your audio in one of two ways, either over the telephone or through your computer. You should see this option under Audio on the webinar control panel. Please be aware that if you wish to speak and ask questions during the webinar, you must be connected with a USB mic and headset or by telephone. Connecting with only headphones will not allow you to speak or ask questions during the webinar. If you do not have a USB microphone, you must connect by phone in order to listen and ask questions during the webinar. Keep in mind that if you are connected by phone and choose to connect via mic and speaker during the webinar, you will be automatically disconnected from the telephone line. If you would like to ask a question, please type your question into the question box and press send. Questions submitted via the question box will be either answered back to you electronically or the moderator will ask the presenter your question. During the webinar, we'll have an open Q&A time for you to ask your question by phone or USB microphone. We will unmute all of the attendees and you'll be able to ask your questions to the presenter. Please keep in mind that this webinar will be recorded. If you are not comfortable with having your voice recorded, you may opt to enter your question through the question box and it will remain anonymous. Now, I will turn it over to Karen Rizel, our CalFresh Outreach Manager.
Good morning. Can people hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Karen.
Getting used to my headset. Welcome everybody. As Tony mentioned, this is Karen Rizel, and we are looking forward to this webinar today. As you know, we have our training next week, our full day of training here in Sacramento, and we're looking forward to seeing all of you next week. But we knew that there are certain topics that we wanted to talk about and get, again, we want to do training. We're going to be doing training at the face-to-face session, but we also will be having a series of webinars because we want to be able to get the word out as quickly as possible on items, as well as be providing training on a regular basis. So this is one of the webinars we will be having, and in addition to our training next week, and then we'll be giving you more information about upcoming webinars as we move forward into our next fiscal year. So with that said, I just wanted to just set some context as well. So again, as you know, we are entering into the new fiscal year and a new contract and a new plan. And there are some changes that we have made in our program from this fiscal year 2015-2016 from previous years. And so that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have the time to talk with you about these changes and make sure that we all understand and have any questions answered regarding those changes. You know, we've been doing a lot of work in our program to simplify it, as well as to provide more structured and consistent scope of works that we have in our program. As you know, FNS has asked us to look at things like how we can have more performance accountability and monitoring in terms of ensuring that we're doing the best that we can for using the dollars that we have for our program. So with that said, let's go ahead and we'll jump into our program. We look forward to this hour.
Hi everyone, this is Detta Hunt, and I'll be starting you all off today talking about and explaining a little more about our scope of work. Next slide, please. One of the first items we're going to be going through is we're just going to be moving through the definitions. And these first set of slides are just basically, we're going to be going through definitions, and then we'll move on to Jeff will give more background on the actual reporting out of the scope of work, the forms, and what it'll look like. We'll run through a couple examples. Our first scope of work item is application submitted. Basically, an application submitted refers to the process of your agency or your subcontractor submitting an application, either online or paper, to the County Welfare Department on behalf of the client. We're very much encouraging you to submit all applications online. And basically, an application that is submitted by a client is really not considered an application submitted by your agency. Applications should be as complete as possible and include all necessary documentation. This is very important because one of the things that when we're working with our counties that, we talk about CalFresh outreach, and this really gives us, the basis for doing CalFresh outreach is providing the county an application that is complete, filled out, and includes all the necessary documentation. Next slide, please. When you're going to be documenting your efforts in application submitted, you count that on your scope of work report spreadsheet, which we'll be going through later in this presentation. And some of you have already received your scope of work spreadsheet by your program analyst. The rest of you will be receiving that later today or first thing tomorrow. You also can use we encourage you to use the CalFresh activity log to track your submitted applications. The activity log will be on the website shortly, I believe. And we also the other component of the submitted application this is where you will track your special populations. Please remember, we're not tracking a specific application. We're only tracking the number of applications. Next slide. A little word about special populations. I wanted to run this through really quick so there's not a lot of confusion. It's basically for seniors age 60 and over. Working low-income households is a household that has earned income and qualifies for the program. Immigrants are eligible non-citizens, people that are eligible for the program and have legal status to be in the U.S. Latinos are those that trace their ancestry to Cuba, Mexico, Puerto Rico, Central and South America. Mixed status household, this is one of the components that USDA really wanted us to track because it really affects how we look at our caseload in California because it is such an issue. So for purposes of CalFresh outreach, a mixed status household is one that contains one or more ineligible non-citizens and one or more ineligible non-citizens and one or more eligible non-citizens. So it's basically we're looking at a mixed immigration status household. Veterans, military families, again, military veterans and families of active duty military. So that's kind of our special populations. Next slide. This is the one that you guys have shown a lot of concern over and a lot of questions. CalFresh applications approved. Next slide. Basically, an approved application is an application that was completed by your agency or subcontractor, either online or on paper, and submitted to the County Welfare Department on behalf of the client and subsequently approved by the County Welfare Department. Next slide. The documentation that we're looking for this scope of work item is basic approved applications must be reported on the CalFresh scope of work spreadsheet. Applications do not have to be tracked on an individual basis. This is very, we want you to understand that we're not looking for did Sally's application get approved, and if not, what were we're not looking for that level of detail. We just need to know out of the number of applications that you do, how many were approved. They should basically be tracked in aggregate, and we really are encouraging you to use the CBO portal or work with your county to determine a process that works for those applications that you turn in on paper. There again, this is where it's so important to really look at utilizing the online application as much as possible. And in our meetings next week, we'll go through more best practices and things that are on the horizon to make that easier for your organization. Again, when you submit your scope of work report, your program analyst will give you a call. We'll discuss the progress, and we'll go more about how that progress will look as we go on through the contract year later in this presentation. Next slide. Suggested strategies. This is more about the SAS system. We really want you to use one of the consortiums, Leader, C4, CalWin, and their CBO portals that will allow you to track the number of submitted apps, pending apps, approved apps, denied apps. We're not asking you to collect all that information. We're just really looking at what your approved applications are. But as you see, the CBO portal gives you the ability to really kind of follow your little number of applications, your marbles, so to speak, through the process. We want you to become really familiar with the SAS system that you'll be accessing on your client, on behalf of your clients. We want your staff to really be familiar and comfortable with those systems. And also, as we're starting out the contract year, please make sure that you have registered with the CBO portal and that you're using the appropriate tracking codes. And there again, your staff needs to be trained that when they're submitting an application on behalf of the client online, that they use the appropriate tracking codes for your agency. Next slide. Semi-annual reports and SAR 7s, recertification applications. There again, next slide. We'll be moving, there again, we're just going to be asking you to track that. It's basically when the client completes those forms and you submit them to the County Welfare Department on behalf of the client. So next slide. The documentation, there again, applications must be supported on the CalFresh Scope of Work report spreadsheet provided by your program analyst. Again, we're encouraging that you use the activity log. We have a really nifty new activity log to track the SAR 7s and recertifications. It'll all be tracked for your agency in one spot. Finally, this is the general catch-all section. This is partnering with, you're partnering in your general CalFresh outreach activities for your scope of work number 5. Next slide. This is distributing material, tabling at events, working to promote, going into your collaborative meetings, providing training and technical assistance to other organizations and agencies that are serving your targeted populations especially. This is really the meat and potatoes of what you do. This is how you get those applications, and we do want to hear about it. Most particularly, we don't want you to spend time tracking it. We know that that's onerous, and what we really want to hear is have a good narrative twice a year, next slide, that provides a description of what those activities are and what you're doing and how you're doing your outreach. That's very important to us, and that really makes those semi-annual narrative progress reports much more valuable. I'm going to move this back to Tony, and I want to know if we have any questions.
All right. So right now we're going to go ahead and open up the lines and unmute everyone. So if you do have a question, please remember to state your name and organization and go ahead and ask your question. All right, I'm going to go ahead and unmute everyone now. So if you have a question, please go ahead and chime in.
This is Christina. Can you hear me?
Yes, Christina, we can hear you.
Hi, I have a question. What if a client doesn't want to answer on the ethnicity? Is that, what would we just not still, I mean, so basically I'm just asking, yeah, what if they don't want to answer that question?
Hi, Christina. It's Etta. You know, we do realize that a lot of clients don't want to answer ethnicity questions, and that's fine. You know, you don't have to report. You can just, you know, just kind of keep a tally of those that decline to report would be probably helpful. You know, either that or if they are working in low income. The trick with the special populations is to really look at what best fits the client. You know, we want to know who's working low income. We want to know if they're living in a mixed status household. And those are things that basically you will know from working the case. And hopefully you know, they'll have a rapport with their worker, I mean with the outreach with their outreach person that they're working with, and they should feel comfortable. It's part of gaining that trust.
Jetta, this is Karen. I wanted to also add that on the activity log, there is a space for other or unknown. And so that's something that you can just record.
So that other and unknown, is that specifically around the ethnicity question, or is
It's around the special populations. Again, it's special populations.
Okay.
It's one of those 6 populations. And if you can't discern it or they don't want to answer it or whatever, then go ahead and just put other or unknown.
Okay.
There is some background noise from someone, so if you are able to mute yourself when you're not speaking, that would be great.
Do we have any other questions to ask the panel?
I had one more question. Tony, this is Christina again.
Yes, Christina.
And I will say I'm not super familiar with the CBO portal, but one question I have is if you know whether the portal allows for anticipated counts of approved applications. I know it shows us the approved applications, but can we get print-offs for a specific time frame so that we know that we're not counting, double counting, for example, from one month to the next?
Christina, this is Detta. That's a really good question. And you know what? I'm going to put that in the parking lot and make sure that we answer it at the training next week.
Detta, I can answer that question.
Oh, okay.
So if on our, well, 2 things. On our website, our outreach website, we have a space where we have a video and a training document for the C4 and the CalWin CBO portal. And one of the things that you can do in the portal, and we'll talk about this more next week as Detta mentioned, is you can specify a time frame. So you can specify from this date to this date what it is you want to report.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, do we have any other questions out there?
Hello, this is Arcelia with San Ynez Valley People Helping People.
Hi, Arcelia. Go ahead and answer your question.
Yes, when will the new scope of work activity sheet be available?
Hi, Arcelia. You'll be getting the scope of work report probably end of today or beginning of tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
And then there'll also be the activity sheet, which will be online.
And that should be available today.
Thank you, Arcelia. Are there any other questions before we move on? All right. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and put everyone back on mute, and we'll go ahead and continue on with the webinar.
All right, we're going to go ahead and give a specific example surrounding this scope of work activity of approved applications. And the scenario that we have here is that prime contractor A has set in your contract a annual scope of work of 300 approved applications, which averages out to about 25 approved applications per month. So our contractual expectation is that you complete at least 75% of your annual scope of work for approved applications. And that's really important. We're not talking about approval rates. We're just saying of the 300 approved applications, by the end of the contract term, we need to see at least 225 approved applications to meet your contractual goals and expectations. So let's take a look at the next slide. So for instance, and this, by the way, is a portion of the scope of work report form that you'll be receiving if you have not already received it from your program analyst. But we're simply asking for total numbers in each column by subcontractor. So for instance, in the first month of the program, in October of this year, you and your subcontractor submit 50 applications. This is just applications submitted, and you'd report the actual numbers as shown in this little diagram here. Go ahead and move to the next page. So for that month, however you determine the total number of approved applications, you would just report the total number of approved applications. So for instance, here in the month of October, you're able to determine that 20 of your 50 applications were approved by the county. And we realize that there's going to be a lag time here. And as Detta said, we're not worried, or for our contract's purposes, we're not concerned that you're tracking colored marbles. You know, if you submit a blue marble, you're not looking for a blue marble on the other end. You know, it's just you submit all your applications and then you count all the applications that were approved by the end. So when you compare then, and this is what your program analyst will be tracking with you, is for the month of October, your expected scope of work deliverable for approved applications would be 25. But for this month, you have 20 approved. So, you know, and there is kind of a time lag, as I mentioned, but over the length of the contract, this lag will be smaller and smaller, and we won't have the final results of your submitted applications until probably, you know, a month or two after the contract years. So, but we'll go into depth as to how that all works when we meet next week during the training. So next slide, please. So if you go on to the next month of the contract for November, say you only submitted 20 applications for that month. Go ahead to the next slide, please. So in that month, you could have actually more applications that were approved because you had a total of 70 applications in the pipeline. So you submit 20 and you find that 30 of your applications that have been submitted in October and November have been approved during the month. So the expected scope of work would be 50 by the end of November at that 25 approved applications per month. And here in November, your total approved applications to this point is 50. So your approved and your scope of work at this point in time match. Next slide, please. So if you take this on through the subsequent months of the program, what you submit to the county or counties that you're working with, we're not expecting a one-to-one correspondence of what's submitted to what's approved, but we are very interested in the approved applications for each month. So through November, you have 50 approved applications. In December, if you have 25 approved applications, you're right on par with your scope of work. 75 approved, 75 expected. If you find in January there's only 15 approved applications, then you're a little bit behind expectations at this point in time, 90 to 100. But come February, there's a whole bunch of activity. Everyone gets back from vacation, and you find that you have 45 approved applications. At this point, you'd have 135 approved, and your expected scope of work goal would be 125. So that's kind of how it works, is as you report your approved applications, we're going to be comparing it to where you should be in terms of your monthly goal. And that's something that your program analyst will go over with you within about 10 days of you submitting the scope of work for each billing period. So next slide, please. So in summary, again, if you've got an annual scope of work and your goal is to have 300 applications approved in that contract year, then 225 or more approved applications fulfills the contract. So that's kind of our example of the marbles in the jar, where the marbles go in as approved applications, the marbles come out as approved applications, and if you are marvelous and every one of your applications that you submit is approved, then that's phenomenal. But we're expecting that you're going to have to submit a greater number of applications than what you get approved. Whatever that number of submittals is just depends on how well your people are filling out the applications and all that. So we'll kind of figure this out as we go as you work with your program analyst. So at this point, what questions do you have?
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, everyone. So this time, what we're going to do now is we're going to use the raise the hand function in order to prevent any additional noise from other callers who are not asking questions. So on your dashboard, you should see a little hand icon. If everyone could please click that hand icon just to test to make sure that everyone has found it, we would really appreciate it. So please take a moment and find the icon. Oh, and there's some right there. All right, we'll just wait for a couple more people to click on the hand icon. All right, perfect. I'm gonna go ahead and lower everyone's hands down. So now if you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand and I'll go ahead and unmute you and you can ask your question to the presenters. So if you have a question, please use the hand icon to ask your question. So since there are no hands being raised, it sounds like everyone is in full understanding of Jeff's presentation. If you have any comments that you want to make, this is a great opportunity to do that as well.
Tony, this is Karen. Do you think we could just open it up real quick? I just want to make sure that we're not letting, just in case somebody does have a question.
Definitely. I'll go ahead and open the lines right now.
Okay.
Okay, the lines are all open now.
Okay. Sorry, we are getting some background noise again. This is Karen, and I just wanted to make sure that everybody had an opportunity to ask a question. So before we closed our webinar today, as Tony mentioned, this is being recorded. So are there any additional questions that people have regarding our presentation today?
Karen, this is Christina. I'll ask another question. This is Christina from Catholic Charities. This may be something you're going to go over in the training, so that's fine. But I had a question about the documentation required in addition to the actual tracking that we have to turn in, and whether will that be covered in the training, or is that something we should talk about today?
I think I'll wade in on that a little bit, Christina. This is Jeff Lassiter. And in terms of the documentation, basically all we're looking for is your scope of work report. We will discuss how you can get at some of those numbers and figures, but we're just looking for the narrative a couple times a year on scope of work number 5, all the outreach activities, and then we're just looking for numbers in the other 4 scopes. So however your organization can best get at those numbers, that's what we're looking for, and that's what we're going to help you guys with.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and we also have one question that came through the question box. The question is, if the county is unable to track paper application, what do we suggest that they do?
That's a very good question, and we've been asking this question of the consortia because you're not always going to be able to get answers from the counties, and we realize this. So the consortia have all told me that electronic applications can be tracked. So if you submit an application through the CBO portal, that can definitely be tracked. In C4 counties, unless the county comes forward and offers a solution for paper applications, in C4 counties there is no way for the eligibility worker on their screen to enter your specific CBO into the application. They can note generally that the application came from a CBO, but they cannot put in their application screen that the application came from your CBO or your subcontractor. So that's a big limitation, and that's why we're encouraging people to go the electronic route and use CBO portals. I know there are some counties in CalWin that are allowing paper applications to be submitted, but that's on a county-by-county basis. And Leader down in LA, while they have the capability of going paper, they have said that they are really discouraging paper applications in LA and are moving everyone as much as possible to their, what do they call it, Your Benefits Now. So that's kind of where we're at with paper.
This is Karen, and I will also add that one of the things, as Jeff mentioned, we're working with the consortia, and we'll talk more about this next week as well, is that we are also talking with counties and looking at how we can create those partnerships. And so as you are working through some of those conversations with your counties, we are here and available to help facilitate those conversations. So you can bring us into the loop, and we will help facilitate that.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Jeff. Are there any other questions out there for the panel today?
Hi, this is Arcelia with People Helping People again. I've been in contact with our county, and I guess, you know, our county has agreed to provide us with the information manually. However, from what I understand is that there's going to be a higher level of functionality that CBOs will be able to do on CalWin. So I believe that's something that's coming down the pipeline. But, you know, what I am concerned is about the turnaround period from our local county to be able to provide us with the outcome of the application.
So this is Karen, and I'll respond in two ways with that. One is that, again, anything that comes through electronic on the portal will be immediate. So that data will be available as soon as you run the report. Secondly, as you know, when you submit an invoice, there's always a lag period between the time that the period ends and the time you submit the invoice, and so that gives you time to collect the data that you need to be able to submit the invoice.
Thank you, Karen. Do we have any more questions out there? Okay, so I take the silence that we do not have any additional questions from the attendees. Do we have any final statement from the panelists today?
No, I think we covered it. Thank you, Tony.
All right.
This is Karen. I will just say that, again, thank you for attending this today. And if you do have things that come up that are, again, we have the parking lot here, but if you have questions that come up between today and next week that you would like to have us address, please feel free to send an email to CalFresh Access at dss.ca.gov, and we will add that to the things that we will be talking about next week at our face-to-face.
All right, thank you, Karen. All right, so this concludes our webinar for today. I'd like to thank Karen, Jeff, Detta, and Stephanie for conducting this webinar. Thank you very much for attending today's webinar. We appreciate your time. Have a great day.